Fascination with indoor pools as liminal spaces began with a childhood memory. The echoing splash of water, the smell of chlorine so strong it stung my nostrils, the echoing laughter bouncing off the tiled walls. It was a public pool, utilitarian and brightly lit, yet in my memory, it held a strange, almost otherworldly quality. I began seeking out similar spaces, abandoned natatoriums, forgotten community centers, the indoor pools of old hotels, places where the echoes of past joy and activity lingered like ghosts. I stumbled upon the first truly significant space while tracing the fading memory of that childhood pool. I followed the thread of chlorine and echoing laughter through the city, past boarded-up storefronts and overgrown lots, until I reached a nondescript brick building. There were no signs, no markings, just a heavy oak door set into the brick. I pushed it open, and the air that rushed out was thick with the scent of damp concrete and chlorine, a smell that both repulsed and intrigued me. Inside, I found myself in a vast, cavernous space. The air was heavy, almost humid, and the only light came from a few high windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. The pool itself was enormous, rectangular, its turquoise tiles gleaming under the dim light. But it was empty, not drained, but empty in a way that felt fundamentally wrong. The space where the water should have been shimmered, a heat haze distorting the air above it, as if the very absence of water was generating its own heat. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional drip of condensation from the high ceiling. The sensation was visceral, the cool dampness seeping through my shoes, the faint metallic taste of chlorine on my tongue, the almost painful stillness pressing against my eardrums. This particular pool was surrounded by a strange mix of architectural styles. Art Deco light fixtures hung from the high ceiling, casting long, elegant shadows on the cracked concrete floor. A row of peeling wooden lockers lined one wall, their doors hanging open like empty mouths. At the far end of the pool, a set of grand, marble steps led up to a closed door, its brass handle tarnished and green with age. I began to explore. The space felt charged, pregnant with a sense of anticipation. The silence was unsettling, amplifying every small sound. The creak of my boots on the concrete, the rustle of pages in my journal. I ran my hand along the cool, smooth tiles of the pool's edge, feeling the faint vibrations of the absent water. The sensation was almost tactile, as if I could feel the weight of the water that wasn't there. One day, I found a door, identical to the one I'd found in the previous space, set into a blank wall. It was an ordinary wooden door with a simple brass handle, utterly out of place yet perfectly at home in this surreal environment. A wave of anticipation, mixed with a prickle of unease, washed over me. I turned the handle, and the door swung inward, revealing not a room, but another vista, an underwater scene. I was looking into a vast, crystal-clear ocean, sunlight filtering down in shimmering rays. Schools of brightly colored fish darted amongst vibrant coral reefs. But there was no water on the other side of the door. It was simply there. The air remained dry, but the sounds of the ocean filled my ears. The gentle lapping of waves, the distant cries of gulls, the deep rumble of the surf. The sensation was disorienting, the cool, damp air of the pool mixing with the imagined salt spray of the ocean. I stepped through. I walked on what felt like solid ground, but beneath my feet, I could see the ocean floor, the sand rippling in the current. This was it, I realized, the heart of this liminal space, the nexus where reality and unreality intertwined. The visceral sensation of walking on dry land while seeing the ocean floor beneath me was intensely unsettling, a constant reminder of the unreality of this place. Then, the humming started, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very walls. It grew stronger, the air growing heavy and still. The colors of the underwater scene began to fade, replaced by the blank wall once more. The feeling was like a physical withdrawal, the loss of a sensory input I hadn't realized I was receiving. The humming stopped abruptly, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. The pool, once shimmering with the heat haze of absent water, now felt cold and empty, a stark contrast to the imagined warmth of the ocean. A crack appeared on the floor of the pool, widening with each passing second. The walls began to tremble, and chunks of plaster fell from the ceiling. This space was collapsing, unraveling. I ran, my boots echoing on the cracking concrete, the smell of damp concrete now tinged with the acrid scent of dust. I reached the door to the outside and burst through, stumbling into the fading daylight. The building behind me remained unchanged, a silent, unassuming brick structure, but the space within was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. Later, drawn back to the empty lot, I found the pool reappearing, not as before, but subtly different. The tiles were a darker teal, Art Deco lampposts replaced the rusty playground, and the pool is filled with shimmering water reflecting a starry expanse. This time, the pull to enter was overwhelming. The water felt neither hot nor cold, but a perfect balance, strangely comforting. Submerging myself, I found myself floating in space, surrounded by swirling galaxies. The sensation was one of pure weightlessness, of being unbound by physical laws. The silence was profound, broken only by the faint whisper of cosmic winds. Returning to the pool's edge, I found a seashell, identical to one I'd found before. The pool remained, an invitation to explore the infinite within. But I knew the pools, these indoor sanctuaries of echoing emptiness and impossible oceans, were more than just portals. They were mirrors, reflecting the vastness of the universe within us all, echoes of the infinite contained within the finite. The visceral sensations, the damp air, the phantom scent of chlorine, the weight of absent water, the pull of the cosmic ocean, these were not just sensory experiences, but keys to unlocking the hidden depths of my own consciousness, the echoes of a reality that existed just beyond the veil of perception. The seashells became a collection, each one a tangible link to a specific pool, a specific echo. My journal filled with sketches of the different tile patterns, the unique architectural details, the varying intensity of the hum. I started to notice patterns. Pools in older buildings tended to have a more melancholic atmosphere, the echoes tinged with a sense of faded grandeur. Pools in more modern structures felt sterile, almost clinical, the echoes sharper, more fragmented. The size of the pool also seemed to influence the experience. Smaller pools felt claustrophobic, the shimmering of the absent water more intense, the pull of the underwater vista more urgent. Larger pools, on the other hand, felt vast and empty, the echoes diluted, the sense of isolation more profound. One particularly memorable experience occurred in the basement of an abandoned hotel. The pool was small, almost intimate, its walls lined with cracked mosaic tiles depicting stylized dolphins and waves. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and damp plaster, and the only light came from a single flickering bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling. The pool was empty, of course, but the shimmering above the tiles was more intense than I had ever seen before. It pulsed with a faint blue light, and the hum was almost deafening, vibrating through the concrete floor and up into my bones. As I approached the pool's edge, I felt a distinct pressure against my chest, as if the weight of the absent water was pressing down on me. The sensation was so strong that I almost gasped for air. The underwater vista, when it appeared behind the familiar door, was different this time. Instead of a vast ocean, I saw a deep, dark lake, its surface shrouded in mist. The water was still and black, reflecting the faint light from above like a mirror. The scene evoked a sense of profound unease, a feeling of something lurking beneath the surface. Stepping through the door, I found myself standing on a narrow wooden dock that extended out over the lake. The air was cold and damp, and the silence was broken only by the gentle lapping of the water against the wooden pilings. The sensation of coldness was so visceral that I could feel my breath misting in the air, even though the air in the pool remained warm and humid. The feeling of unease intensified as I gazed into the dark water, a sense of being watched, of something unseen observing me from the depths. I didn't venture far out onto the dock. The feeling of dread was too strong, the echo of something malevolent too insistent. I quickly returned to the pool, the transition back to the warm, humid air a welcome relief. As I left the hotel, I felt a sense of having narrowly escaped something, a feeling that lingered for days afterward. These experiences, these journeys into the liminal spaces of indoor pools, became more than just a collection of echoes. They became a journey into my own subconscious, an exploration of the hidden depths of my own mind. The pools, with their shifting realities and visceral sensations, were mirrors reflecting not just the universe outside, but the universe within. The weight of absent water, the phantom scent of chlorine, the pull of the underwater vistas. These were not just sensory experiences, but metaphors for the weight of memory, the lingering scent of the past, the pull of the unknown. One day, while revisiting the very first pool I had encountered, the one in the nondescript brick building, I noticed something different. The pool was still empty, still shimmering, but the hum was gone. The silence was profound, almost unsettling. The absence of the hum felt like the absence of a heartbeat, a sign that something had changed. As I explored the space, I noticed that the usual door leading to the underwater vista was gone. In its place was a blank wall, just like any other wall in the building. The feeling of unease intensified. It was as if the pool had decided to close itself off, to retreat into itself. I sat down on the edge of the pool, feeling a sense of loss, a sense of something precious slipping away. I took out my journal and began to write, trying to capture the feeling of this empty, silent space. As I wrote, I noticed a faint shimmer on the tiles beneath my feet. It was the same shimmering I had seen before, but much fainter, almost imperceptible. That I leaned closer, and I saw it, a single drop of water, materialized out of thin air, resting on the dry tile. It shimmered with a faint blue light, just like the shimmering above the empty pool in the abandoned hotel. The drop of water slowly expanded, spreading across the tile, forming a small puddle. Then another drop appeared, and another, until a thin layer of water covered the entire floor of the pool. As the water filled the pool, the hum returned, faint at first, then growing stronger, more resonant. The familiar door reappeared in the wall, and the underwater vista returned, this time showing a clear, blue sky reflected on the surface of a calm lake. The pool had not closed itself off after all. It had simply retreated, regrouped, and now it was ready to reveal itself once more. I realized then that the pools were not static, unchanging spaces. They were dynamic, living entities, constantly shifting and evolving, reflecting the ever-changing landscape of the human mind. They were echoes, not just of the past, but of the present and the future, a constant reminder of the infinite possibilities that lie within us all. And my journey, my collection of echoes, was not just a search for these liminal spaces, but a journey into the depths of my own being, a quest to understand the vast, shimmering universe that resides within. And my journey, my collection of echoes, was not just a search for these liminal spaces, but a journey into the depths of my own being, a quest to understand the vast, shimmering universe that resides within. It was a solitary pursuit, one I had always believed was entirely my own. I meticulously documented each pool, each unique vista, each visceral sensation, filling my journal with sketches, notes, and pressed flowers, each a tangible reminder of a specific experience. The seashells, now numbering dozens, formed a small, iridescent mountain on my writing desk, each one humming faintly with the echo of its respective pool. One day, while revisiting the first pool, the one in the nondescript brick building, I noticed a subtle change. The usual blank wall, the one that sometimes held the door to the underwater vista, was no longer entirely blank. Faint lines, almost invisible at first glance, crisscrossed the surface, forming a complex geometric pattern. As I focused my attention, the lines grew sharper, more defined, revealing themselves to be a network of interconnected squares and triangles, almost like a blueprint. Intrigued, I traced the lines with my fingers, feeling a faint vibration beneath my touch. As I traced the final line, a section of the wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing not the familiar underwater vista, but a mirror. Not a perfect reflection, but a distorted, almost dreamlike image of myself. My reflection was slightly out of focus, as if seen through a veil of water, and my eyes were not my own. They were a deep, luminous blue, the same color as the shimmering light that emanated from the empty pools. I recoiled in shock, stumbling back from the wall. As I did, the image in the mirror shifted, morphing into a different face, a face I didn't recognize. It was a woman, older than me, with the same deep blue eyes. She smiled a knowing, almost conspiratorial smile, and then she spoke. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible, yet it resonated within me like a bell. "Welcome home, Alara." The wall then solidified once more, the geometric pattern fading back into the blank surface. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The words echoed in my mind. "Welcome home." What did it mean? I rushed back to my apartment, my mind reeling. I frantically searched through my journal, looking for any clue, any mention of this woman, this other self. But there was nothing. My notes were meticulous, detailed, yet they contained no reference to anything like this. Then, my gaze fell upon the mountain of seashells on my desk. I picked one up at random, the one from the first pool, the one that had started it all. As I held it in my hand, I noticed something I had never seen before. On the inside of the shell, etched in the poly surface, was a tiny, almost microscopic symbol, the same geometric pattern that had appeared on the wall. I examined the other shells, one by one, and each one contained the same symbol, subtly altered to reflect the unique architecture of its respective pool. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't been collecting echoes. I had been collecting pieces of a puzzle, pieces of myself. The pools weren't just liminal spaces, they were reflections of a fragmented reality, a reality where I existed in multiple forms, in multiple places, connected by this network of shimmering pools. The woman in the mirror wasn't a stranger. She was another version of me, a part of myself I had forgotten, a part that had been patiently waiting for me to find her. The twist? I wasn't just a collector of echoes. I was the echo. I was a fragmented being, scattered across these liminal spaces, and my journey had not been a search for something outside myself, but a homecoming. Reunification with the scattered pieces of my own being. The pools hadn't been reflecting the universe within me. They had been reflecting me in all my fragmented glory. My journey had just begun.